My friend Dale McGowan has written a couple amazing books about raising kids if you're an atheist parent. And he's coming out with a book very soon called In Faith and in Doubt. And it's about couples who have interfaith marriages where they both have different religious beliefs. And how do you make a relationship like that work? And he put out a list of at least some advice you can give to people if they are in interfaith relationships. And I wanted to offer that advice to you here with my own thoughts mixed in there. I should say, just to make this really simple, I'm going to just say I'm an atheist and my wife is a Christian, and I'll work off of there. But please feel free to apply this to whatever gender your partner is and whatever situation you guys are in when it comes to religion. Never try to convert or deconvert your partner. It would make very little sense for me to go into a relationship knowing my partner's a Christian and then saying, you got to become an atheist, or for her to tell me you got to become a Christian. If we know that going into the relationship and we're both very headstrong in our own beliefs, we have to accept that as it is. You're not going to win any points by trying to convince the other person that they're an idiot or that they're wrong or that they should come to your side. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have debates or discussion about it, but you definitely should learn not to have full-on arguments over why that person believes what they believe. And if you can't have those discussions, maybe that's not a relationship you should be going into. Discuss your beliefs early on in the relationship. I'm not saying this has to be a first date topic of conversation, but if you think this is going to go somewhere, if you think this is going to be a serious relationship, then as soon as possible, you should get out in the open what it is you believe and what your partner believes. Because you definitely don't want to wait to have a baby until you finally have an argument over whether or not to baptize it or whether or not to circumcise your baby. Like, that conversation should have happened a long time ago. And the earlier you can get your differences out there and say, this is what I believe, and you know what your partner believes, the easier it's going to be for you to navigate those differences in the long term. Figure out how you're going to deal with these religious differences as you grow in your relationship. You know, if you have kids, are you going to go to church? Is my wife going to go to church with the kids? Do I have to go to church with them? What are we going to teach our children about our differences of beliefs? You know, if you're an atheist married to an evangelical Christian, are you going to teach them about Jesus? Are you going to teach them that evolution is, the proper way that life is formed on earth? Are you going to teach them about creationism? Figure those types of things out before you get to the point where you have no choice but to make a decision. Figure out where you overlap. Because even if you have religious differences, there may be a lot of places where you both actually do believe the same things. You know, if my wife loves giving gifts because it's Christmas time, and I like giving gifts because it's just a festive time of the year, then let's make that into a tradition of our own. And we can believe those for different reasons, but let's embrace the idea that we like to give around this time of year. If you both like to meditate, maybe she likes to do it for religious reasons and you like to do it just to clear your mind. All right, fine. Find a time when you both can meditate together, even if you have different reasons for doing it. Find those places where you like doing things together, even with your religious differences, and just make the most of that overlap. Learn how to disagree amicably. And that's not an easy thing to do. I know sometimes when I hear creationist talk or I hear pastors preach, I can feel my blood pressure rising. But, if your wife says something or your husband says something and you disagree with them, you got to find a way to deal with those differences in a way that doesn't make you both stressed out. If you say God doesn't exist, is your partner going to freak out or think that there's something wrong with you? And the same thing if she says she does believe in God. Are you going to start flipping out? Are you going to get stressed out over that? You got to find a way to disagree amicably in a way that you both can get past it. And you don't have to react to your partner the same way you would, say, a famous talking head who brings up religion. If you want to be stressed out about them or if you want to go after them, go for it. But you shouldn't react the same way when your partner does it. Learn about your partner's worldview. Just because she says she's a Christian doesn't necessarily mean you know where she stands on the issues. I mean, if you showed me 100 Christians, I would show you 100 different versions of Christianity. So, just that label doesn't necessarily mean anything. So find out what she actually thinks about life and God and death and the afterlife. And the same goes the other way. If you're an atheist, she should find out what that exactly means for you and what that means about the way you live your life. Remember that her beliefs and her church's beliefs are not necessarily one and the same. I know a lot of Catholics out there who think there's nothing wrong with birth control. And there are a lot of evangelical Christians out there who support comprehensive sex education. It really makes no sense to say, oh, you're a Catholic, so you must agree with the Pope on everything. Because let's face it, in reality, a lot of Catholics don't really care about what the Pope says. So don't just hold them to what their faith says they're supposed to believe, or what you think their faith says they're supposed to believe. Make sure you actually take an effort to find out what they believe on certain issues. And the same goes the other way. A lot of people say, if you say you're an atheist, they're going to say, oh, you must be like Christopher Hitchens and be anti-theist. Or you must be, provocative, like some of the other atheist writers out there. And no, you don't necessarily fall into the same mold as those other atheist writers or talking heads out there. So make sure you just don't look at someone's label and assume you know everything about them. Take a chance to get to know what your partner actually believes on these issues. Consider raising your children with the opportunity to decide their own religious beliefs when they're older. Don't just say mommy's a Christian, so you're going to be a Christian, or dad's an atheist, so you're going to be an atheist, because that's going to confuse the hell out of this kid. Don't turn this into a battle of which parent do you love more. Expose the kid to what you both believe. Explain to the child, look, mommy believes this, daddy believes this, and there are other people out there who believe a lot of different things too. We want to expose you to as much of it as possible. Sometimes you are going to have to go with mommy to church, and sometimes you and dad are going to have a discussion about, maybe why there really is no heaven or hell out there. And we'll expose you to other viewpoints as well, and ultimately you're going to have to come up with your own conclusions on these things, and we're still going to love you no matter what you choose. If you don't do that, you're just setting your family up for a lot of trouble in the future, and you're definitely making life harder for that child who has to decide between which parent's views they want to side with. I should add, it's probably a bad idea that, when mommy leaves the house, it would not be a good idea for me to sit my child down and say, okay, now that mommy's gone, let me tell you why she's a moron when it comes to all of her beliefs. Don't do that. Don't secretly turn your child against the other parent when they're not around. Support your partner from other people who may criticize their views, especially when it comes to extended family members. And I think I've seen this happen a lot when an atheist marries into a religious family, where a lot of people will, let's say, tell the wife, oh, your husband doesn't believe in God, there's something wrong with him, and you got to fix him. Your wife should be the first person to say, yeah, he is an atheist, but let me tell you why he's a good guy, and let me tell you what he does that is amazing. And the same the other way, too. If someone says, oh, your wife is religious, there's something wrong with her, why does she believe that nonsense? You ought to be the first person to say, yeah, she believes it, but so what? Look at all the amazing stuff she does. You should be the first person to defend her. Now, behind closed doors, by all means, you can have a discussion and a debate about these differences, but you also should be the first person to defend your partner, not necessarily their beliefs, but you should defend your partner when other people are criticizing them. And if you're unable to do that, if you don't have that respect for your partner that will allow you to do that, that's not necessarily a stable relationship there. If you have doubts or you change your beliefs, don't keep it a secret. And this happens with a lot of couples I know who may both be Christian going into a marriage, but down the line, maybe one of those people starts losing their faith in God. And the other person is left saying, you're not the person I married. Well, they should be able to be honest with you and say, I don't think I believe this anymore. I'm going to explore this. And I hope you don't fall out of love with them because they're changing their mind so openly and they're doing it publicly. You ought to be the one to say, okay, go embrace it. Go follow these thoughts that you're having and let me help you along the way. Let's have these discussions along the way. Because just because they change their views on God, no matter which way that goes, doesn't mean they're a completely different person anyway. So don't stop them from exploring beliefs, because if you're forcing them to do this on their own, in private, away from you, that's a bad idea. If they're changing their mind, you ought to be a part of that process, and you ought to be able to go on that journey with them. I know it's not easy. I can just imagine if my partner is an atheist and all of a sudden she started believing in God. I know that would be tough for me to swallow. But at the same time, if that's the only change that's happening, I should be able to allow her to explore those beliefs without freaking out or thinking that I need to find a way to stop her. I should say, after all of this, there is a possibility that this interfaith relationship just won't work out. And the best thing we can hope for, though, is that if you get this stuff out of the way up front in the relationship and you realize that it's probably not going to work out, that you can part ways before it gets really serious. One of the things that happens is some couples, even though they have these hardcore differences religiously, they still manage to get married, and they don't hash out these differences until long after they're married. And that's a problem. If you can work this out up front and you realize, you know what, you are super religious and I'm an atheist, and we both can't handle that with the other person, maybe this relationship isn't going to work out. That is an option. That is something worth considering, because it's only going to lead to heartache if you don't reconcile that right up front. So, it's important to note that sometimes the relationship may not be there if you don't think you can get past these differences. But if you both want to make it work, there are ways to make it work. It's not going to be easy, but there are ways to make interfaith relationships successful. My name is Hemant Mehta, and I write at friendlyatheist.com. Please leave your comments below, and we will check them out.